Hello and welcome, beautiful souls, to the Angelic Awakening podcast. My name is Kate and I'm your host. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to the Angelic Awakening podcast, episode 3. I'm so excited and grateful to have you guys here with me. Thank you for being here. So in the previous 2 episodes, I touched on my family ties within the spiritual realm and then also my birth story as well. Episode 3, I'm going to be talking about a couple of experiences that I had that led me to awakening in my experience. So a couple of things. When I was younger, my mum took me to a spiritual church, which is located in Enmore, which is just near Newtown, so inner city, Sydney. And this church is a beautiful place. It's just a very supportive network of like-minded individuals who are there to support people that are on the path of spirituality and awakening. So this was when I was about 6 or 7, I believe. It was before we left Sydney and moved to the country for a while there. And so my mum took me because she wanted to, I guess. And on this day they were doing flower readings, and basically what that was is everyone that wanted to get a reading done just went and found a flower, so anywhere around the church, and I found this beautiful, I can't remember the exact flower, but it was this beautiful fragile little white flower. I think it was like a gardenia or similar to like kind of rose, like it had these beautiful delicate flowers. Anyways, so I picked my flower, I put it into the little brown paper bag and put it in the little basket, and my mum was there beside me and we're going through all the different readings, and she pulled out my bag, and when she pulled my flower out, I got so excited. I was like, oh, what's she gonna say? And she said, oh wow, we've got a very special spirit here with us today. And my mum kind of just like grabbed my hand, because she was in the back of her mind, she's like one of those people, and I love her to death, but she always thinks like the worst case scenario. What's gonna happen? What is she gonna say? Because even to this day and back then, I have like quite a gentle spirit, and so like I always take things to heart, especially when people say mean or hurtful things. Like it goes straight in there and it's just like like a stab. And so my mum in the back of her mind was just like, I hope she doesn't say anything derogatory because it will absolutely crush her. And anyway, she said, so we have a very special spirit here with us today. Whoever picked this flower, can you please stand up? And so I stood up on my little 2 legs and I was just, oh, what's she gonna say? And she said, this person is going to be extremely gifted and they're going to be extremely creative. I just hear music. And she was on the money, because not only was music my life for pretty much my whole life up until I was a teenager, I lived and breathed it. Like I started singing before I could talk. And, you know, coming from the family that I did, everyone's creative as well as, you know, being spiritual and everything else. And so music was deep within my soul. It's who I was as a person. And I used to spend every weekend competing in competitions right across New South Wales, and was doing very well at it as well. So she was very correct on that stuff. And, you know, I spent a long time on YouTube actually. I had another channel. And again, it came back to that not wanting to be crushed, unfortunately. People are not always nice. There was a lot of love, don't get me wrong. There was so much love, and it was a huge learning experience for me. I didn't have much self-esteem. I don't know why. I think just because I never really believed in myself. And so a lot of those negative comments really did get to me in the end, and that's why I had to step away and take a break. But in saying that, I also went on to another career as well, which I will talk about in a little bit. So that was the spiritual church. It was a fun day, and I recommend it to anyone. It's actually still open. So if you're looking for somewhere that you can go and see person to person, get that sort of support and guidance, or if you have any questions and stuff, they're in Enmore. I can link down below the website for them if you wish to have a look. I'm not sure if they're doing the flower readings anymore, but it was a really nice experience and I loved it. The second experience is going to be talking about my near-death experience. So back when I turned 18, I thought I had met the love of my life. It was a very, I don't know the right word to use here, and just excuse me because I'm actually reopening a chapter of myself that was incredibly hard. So I was with a guy, for basically when I turned 18 until just after a year. So after I turned 19, it was a very, very hard time. A lot of emotional, mental manipulation, gaslighting, really drove me to a dark place where I basically hit rock bottom. And I didn't know who I was anymore. It was just a really hard time. And it reached a point that I was at a person's house, a person who I thought was a friend, but they actually weren't. And we had another fight, and it just reached a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't have any self-worth. I didn't have any confidence. I felt so incredibly broken, like nothing was ever going to get better. And I literally laid there that night and I just said, that's it. I've had it. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. There is nothing to live for. I'm so miserable. I can't get I can't get myself together. And you know, my parents had fought for me so hard to get out of this relationship because they could see what it was doing to me, how it was tearing me absolutely apart. But I felt even so disconnected from them because I was so disconnected from myself. And so I just laid there in the bed that night and I just said, nah, I just want to go. Like, I just don't want to be here anymore. We're going there. A couple of years prior, I tragically lost my cousin who I was extremely close with. I loved her to death. She was like a sister to me. And she was down visiting our farm, and she got the call and she said to me, Kate, I need to go home. And I said to her, I said to my mum, I was like, I don't want her to go. I don't want her to go. And I remember traveling into town. She was going to catch the train back to Sydney and then back to where she lived, for family reasons. And I remember saying to her, I just looked into her eyes and I knew that I was never going to see her again. I wasn't. I just had this deep inside knowing that when she went, she was not going to come back. And she unfortunately committed suicide. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because when I went through my near-death experience that night, I remember laying in bed and then next minute I was just completely paralyzed. I couldn't move. And this bright light came down and the noise was deafening. Like, I couldn't move and it was just so loud in my ears. And this hand came down, this big hand in the white, like this big bright light. And it was God. He was putting his hand out to me, or spirit. That's who I, sorry, I'm just, so a big bright white light came down with a hand and I knew who it was. It was spirit. saying, you can come with me if you want. And even though my body was paralyzed and I was so frightened, I just wanted to go. And so I went to put my hand up, and all I heard was this screaming, Kate, wake up, wake up. It is not your time to go. It is not. And it was my cousin. I knew it was her voice. I knew who was communicating to me. And she broke me out of it. If it wasn't for her, I don't know if I'd still be here, to be honest. It was only the sound of her voice that brought me back from that darkness, from that rock bottom. I called my mum the next morning when it was after I laid there and just reflected on what had just happened to me. I couldn't believe how incredibly lucky I was to have a second chance, and that, you know, her voice came to me and saved me. I, up until that point, had always believed in spiritual stuff because of the family that I'd come through, but I'd never experienced anything like this before. I loved my cousin very much. And, you know, with my nan, they are both with me. So, growing up, I was always the one that people would come to for advice. You know, the soul that they felt that they could come and share any of their problems with or ask for advice. And I've always given my heart to everyone around me. And it's not always been for my betterment. I've always been one to give and not take. And a lot of people took advantage of that throughout my growing up and even into my adulthood. Its boundaries have not been a strong thing for me, but it's something that I'm learning now, something that's incredibly important that I'm going to touch on in further episodes. But I've always, at my heart and soul, I've always loved looking after people. And through this experience with the near-death incident, I turned a corner. I began studying, and so I went into nursing. One of my beautiful friends at the time was a really talented midwife, incredibly knowledgeable. I remember her telling me about all her stories about how she would deliver babies and all that sort of thing, and it sparked a joy inside of me, and I wanted to know more. And so I went into studying nursing. And so I got my degree, and I was like, I want to go and do midwifery now. And so I dabbled in midwifery for a while, and midwifery wasn't my thing. I loved babies, but not in the midwifery sense. I thought I wanted to be midwife, but it actually led me into working in pediatrics, so nursing young children. And I spent, I think it was over 8 years at my beautiful job that I worked at, looking after newborns up until about 18 years of age. I worked in surgical, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But unfortunately, decisions outside of my control have led me to not be a nurse anymore. And that's okay, because everything happens for a reason, as I said in the last episode. And there were circumstances outside of my control that I know of. But in saying that, it was also little obstacles that Spirit was putting in to redirect and pivot me into another pathway. And so when I was towards the end of leaving my job as a nurse, I went through a really hard time because at the time it wasn't my choice to leave. And I'm not going to touch into the reasons why. We've had a lot of stuff going on in the world, stuff that I don't necessarily agree with. Things, I was getting sent messages that things weren't quite right. And I'm sure you can sort of in your mind think what we've been through for the last 3 years, the conditioning we've been through for the last 3 years. And my ethical and moral compasses were no longer aligning with being a nurse at this time. And so I went through a stage of mourning because this is a profession that I saw I could help people. I could help heal people. It's something that I saw myself doing for a very long time. And so when that started to sink in that I was no longer going to be doing this, I started mourning the career that I had just spent the last 8 years working as a pediatric nurse, but I've been a nurse now since 2010. So 12 years as a nurse. And I was mourning, going through that mourning process. And through that, I was experiencing like severe panic attacks, like anxiety, stress, like I have never experienced before. And, turning up to my GP and she's like, you need to start meditating, you need to start doing this, you need to start doing that. And I've never meditated in my life. I was like, my brain's always going 100 miles an hour. So for me to try and sit still, I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I started walking daily. I walked along the beach, which I love. I love being near the ocean. And I started meditating. This is where everything changed. So I know, looking back now, where I am, the career pivot for me was something that was always meant to happen. I was meant to change pathways. And I'm at peace with it now because I'm so much happier. I'm so much healthier. My mind, body, and spirit are in a completely different place to what I was when I was doing shift work in a way that I can't explain. It's like my heart has exploded. Like it has evolved. It is open. And so I started meditating. And when I did, I had never felt such calmness before. Like, never. And when I started meditating, I started seeing things. And at first I thought, this is a bit strange. And so I was like, oh, it might be really nice if I went and meditated down at the beach. And so I went on my normal walk. I'm walking along, listening to music, and then I just got this message that just came through, and it's like, I have this beautiful cliff face on the beach where I go, and there's these beautiful sandstone rocks, and so I got this message. It's like, sit up on the rock and put this meditation on. And I was like, okay. And so I did. I was like, I'm just going to listen. I don't know what this is, if this is me just talking to myself or whatever it is. Anyway, so I just rolled with it because that's my motto now. I'm just like, you just roll on, just roll on with what life throws at you, just roll on. And so anyways, I sat on this rock and I put this meditation on and closed my eyes, started breathing deeply, and just boom, 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 boom. It just came through like bam. And I was just like, I didn't know what I was experiencing. I was sitting there and I had my eyes shut, and then all of a sudden my third eye just went bam. It was open. It was receiving. The sun was like shining in there, and I was getting downloads left, right, and center. I'm just like, I had no idea what the hell was happening. And I was just like, I felt so calm and at ease, don't get me wrong. But I was kind of questioning myself. I'm like, what is going on here? And I was like, oh my Lord, I'm gonna have to speak to my cousin Azzy. So my cousin Azzy has been in this for a very long time. She is so incredibly gifted, and I'm so excited to at some point get her on the podcast. She's very busy at the moment, but when she gets a hot minute, we'll bring her on and we'll discuss things together. But I was like, I need to call Azzy. I need to chat to Azzy. And so I called her and explained everything that happened. And thank God she like put it into perspective. She's like, welcome, my darling. Welcome to my world. Where have you been this whole time? And explained to me, she's like, yeah, it's happening for you. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you, sort of thing. And just reassured me that, you know, this happens when you open up and when you're open to things that are going on around you and everything else. So I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to have had my past career, but I'm also incredibly grateful for pivoting and now moving into something else. And so my third eye's open. Everything's open. And I'm regularly now channeling after being in deep meditation and doing it regularly. I started seeing energies come, and so I follow quite a few different spiritual people here on YouTube and on Instagram. And there's a couple that I'll recommend in the coming podcasts. But I had a feeling before I even looked at it that I was communicating with angels. And when I started researching what I was seeing, that's exactly who I was communicating with. And by communicating and seeing something, when you see an angel, a lot of people like make fluff up about, like, you see their wings, right? Yes, sometimes people can see their wings, but the majority of the time they're actually like a very bright colored aura that you can see, like this beautiful big circle, something like, it's different for every person. And the way that I see them is a beautiful big ambience of light of different colors, and that's how I know who I'm communicating with. And we'll get more into that in another episode because we're ticking on the time here and I don't want to go over too much today. But yeah, like, it has been an incredible journey. There's also another story that I will touch on as well in another podcast. I think that's going to do for today. So I hope you guys sort of have a bit more, you know me a bit better is what I'm trying to say. And I can't wait to catch up with you guys in a couple of days. Hopefully next week I will have the next episode uploaded for you guys. But I think that will do for today. Love you all so much. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.